Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Bolt Action Reloading. Today we're going to be again working with our 300 Winchester Magnum. We're going to be using the 220 grain Sierra Match King as well as Hodgdon Retumbo. Stick around. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here and you'd like to see how I and the rest of you here make our group smaller, start now by subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon. That way you'll get notified when I post next week's video and you won't miss anything. Guys, you've been following along here on the channel, you'll recognize this combination. We have tested the velocity and pressure of our Retumbo and 220 grain Sierra Match King in the past, and it's one of our combinations that I've been the most excited to go back and try. But before we get too deep into here, just in case you're new, let's go over our platform for today. Our test platform for today is our Thompson Center Compass chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. We've replaced its factory plastic stock with a Boyds Pro Varmint laminated hardwood stock with adjustable comb height. We've added a 20 MOA EGW long action scope base. Our scope is an SWFA fixed 16 power mil. It's currently wearing 30mm Seekins precision scope rings, as well as an SWFA bubble level. Our factory trigger has been upgraded with an MCARBO trigger spring kit, and our recoil is being reduced with a Precision Armament M4-72308 brake. With all the initial testing we've done so far, the velocity curve that we got for this has been one of the most exciting, at least in my opinion. Putting that on the screen real quick, you'll see we actually did an initial test with this at 70.57 grains, testing all the way to 79 grains to see what our pressure and velocity might be. This chart might not tell the entire story, and honestly, it is one that's slightly confusing, at least in my opinion. When we initially loaded this test, we were actually only going off Hodgdon's website that listed the max charge for this at 81 grains of Hodgdon's Retumbo. I didn't really want to test it that far initially, even though it was projecting its velocity to be somewhere around 2810 feet per second. We backed it off 2 whole grains, and honestly, I'm glad that I did. Not that I saw anything that really made me nervous, but our velocities were well above what we projected. In fact, obviously, as you can see at 79 grains, 2948 feet per second is what we hit. At least in my opinion, it's not every day that you see such a discrepancy from load data sources. One of the other things that's happened since I did this initial test is they released their updated manual, at least on the Android app, and has new data for this projectile with Hodgdon Retumbo. Interesting to me, they actually list the max charge in their test at 76.4 grains of Hodgdon Retumbo at an estimated velocity of only 2810 feet per second. Draw your own conclusions. 79 grains might be way too much, but 76.4 grains sounds more reasonable, and if you're looking at the chart, you can see that is right smack dab in the middle of a beautiful velocity node that we found when we ran our initial test. That being said, it's probably not going to be a big shocker today that that's exactly where we're going to be concentrating our load development today. Seeing almost a full grain and only seeing an extreme spread of 6 feet per second, if we can find some accuracy in that node, that's exactly what we're looking for. And actually seeing a velocity of 2880 feet per second is certainly a spectacular velocity for this projectile. Now, one of the more significant differences that we're going to have to address today is when we did this velocity workup, we actually did it in some Remington brass. Not saying anything negative against Remington brass. We don't have 25 brand new pieces to go through to do this load development in. We've done some SIG Brass and we've been able to do some match prep on it. That being said, we're going to back down just a little bit below there and try and cover that region as much as we can. Putting another quick chart on your screen, you'll see that our Remington brass has a case volume of somewhere around 91.3 grains of water. Best I can measure it, the SIG Brass has a case capacity of somewhere around 90.65 grains of water. The last time I adjusted for case volume, I did it far too drastically. So we're basically going to back down just a little bit and cover that same arena in our SIG Brass today. We're changing just a little bit more case volume than a half a grain. And because of running our tub final finish system through our rifle, we've actually pushed those lands out a little bit further. We're going to actually extend the overall length of our projectile just a little bit, but still allow it to fit in the magazine. This is actually a different lot than the last time I ran this test. And with the numbers I've been able to measure, the CBTO for this projectile that we're going to shoot is going to be about 2.895 inches, right at a cartridge overall length of 3.472. These just barely fit in our magazine. I'm not sure how reliably these are going to run, but we're going to run them as close to our lands as we can, still fit in our magazine, and hope we can find that same velocity node today. Going over everything real quick, this is SIG twice fired brass. It's been annealed, neck turned just to make sure it was even. Obviously trimmed for length, chamfered and deburred. The primer for using today's is the 215M Large Rifle Magnum Match Primer. Our projectile is a 220 grain Sierra Match King, part number 2240. Overall length right at magazine length at about 3.472 inches. Based on our chart, we're actually going to start with our Hodgdon Retumbo at 75.6 grains and step up in 0.2 grain increments all the way to 76.4 grains. So guys, I hope you're at least half as excited as I am to see how these things shoot. Let's get out to the range and see how they do. Guys, welcome back for the range. Not exactly the most spectacular groups we wanted to shoot today, but we've still got a lot to talk about. So stick around and we'll try and go over everything we can. Now, as we talked about in the beginning of the video, obviously we were trying to explore that 2880 node we saw before in our previous testing. Let's start off our data like we usually do. Starting off at 75.6 grains, our average velocity was 2,849 feet per second. Our standard deviation was 5.2, extreme spread of 13, but an unspectacular 1.633 MOA group. Moving on to 75.8 grains, moving up slightly, 2866 was the velocity that we reached. Standard deviation jumped up to 8.3, extreme spread of 19, slightly better group at 1.348 MOA. Creeping on up to 76 grains, average velocity stayed the same, 2866 feet per second. Our standard deviation opened up again to 9.2, extreme spread of 22, but a 1.254 MOA group. At 76.2 grains, our average velocity was 2877 feet per second, standard deviation to 8.7, extreme spread of 23, and a very unspectacular 2.289 MOA group. Our max load today was 76.4 grains, average velocity dropped slightly to 2871, standard deviation jumped up to 10.8, extreme spread of 28, and a 1.472 MOA group to end our day. Couple things of interest to point out. We have had significant problems previously actually having single-digit standard deviations, and so all but our last was a single-digit standard deviation today, so certainly an upgrade from some of the testing we've done so far. Retumbo seems to be working well in our 300 Winchester Magnum. However, pressure is going to be another story, so make sure you stick around and we're going to cover that information. Now, if you're a regular on the channel, you'll know that just recently we've used a little bit more quick load data, and today's not going to be any different. So today we're going to kind of evaluate our testing with quick load as well as some other information. Let's put our 6.5 guys chart on the screen. You're going to see a populated chart that's going to contain the first 5 loads are going to be today's load data, and loads 6 through 10 are going to be the single shots we did when we compared our original velocity curve that we tested when we used Remington brass. Now, the SIG and Remington brass case volume is slightly different. However, we were still hoping to see a little bit tighter standard deviations in the area than we saw. In addition to the information you see on here, let's talk about what quick load actually perceives as our pressure for today's testing. Now, for those of you guys that are playing along at home, important information you're going to need, in addition to the information we covered at the beginning of the video, was the BA value we used for today was 0.3933. What we did is put in the detailed information into quick load as much as we could for all the overall length and case capacity information. And then we adjusted that BA value till we got the actual velocities that we expected. We'll put another quick chart on our screen. And guys, this basically is the charge versus barrel time, the actual estimated velocity with that BA value, the actual test velocity, and the estimated pressure it would have taken to achieve that velocity. Should quick load be correct in this particular situation, you can obviously see that every single shot we tested today was well over pressure. So, with good conscience, I can't actually recommend any of the loads we tested today, even if we had seen spectacular results. Even our lowest charge of 75.6 grains is well over our 64,000 PSI max that our case says. Keeping in mind these charge weights are well within load data, both on Hodgdon's website as well as Sierra's own for this projectile. Sierra's actual max charge is that 76.4 grains, and they were estimating at 2,800 feet per second. Seeing as the velocity estimated, again, actual test velocity is around that 2880, 2870 mark. We are well above it, and according to quick load, to get that velocity, our pressure is well above 64,000. Not that I recommend shooting any of these things, but the barrel time information I thought was particularly interesting. For the velocities we're actually shooting, our barrel times for today are actually slightly over. Keeping in mind our targets would be, for our fifth node, would be that 1.2282 millisecond. Doing some quick work and quick load, it looks like 75.1 grains at an estimated velocity of 2837 feet per second would have been what that node would have fallen on, somewhere in that ballpark anyway. Unfortunately, at 66,510 PSI, that quick load estimates that load to still be at is well over our 64,000. Our next node down hit the barrel time of 1.3084 milliseconds. We need to slow our round all the way down to 2735 feet per second, somewhere in the ballpark of 72 grains. So if we revisit this load, we might try and test somewhere down around that range. If any of you guys are complete quick load wizards, and if you have some additional information, I'd love to know what it is below. Retumbo being used in this rifle seems to have given us significantly higher velocities than we expected. Certainly not complaining about getting extra velocity, but extra pressure is certainly not what we're really looking for. I'm not sure any of our groups today were really significantly great, making us want to repeat them anyway. Speaking of pressures we usually do, I'll put some shots of the brass on the screen. You'll be able to see the SIG Brass. No real pressure signs out of the ordinary as far as what we're used to. We've certainly had our primers flatten more than these particularly did. Compared to our stock brass that you'll see in the photo, really nothing significant here. But again, with those pressures from quick load, it's not making me feel any better. Our best group today being at 1.254 MOA. Well, certainly not our worst group we've ever shot with this rifle. Still not worth writing home about if you ask me. Seeing as dropping our load just a little bit would bring us back to at least one of our nodes. Again, that's still over pressure. We did see, as we got closer to that node, our standard deviation was dropping, though there's certainly no guarantee that it's not going to open back up if we drop it below our 75.6 grain charge. So guys, even if you're not into 300 Winchester Magnum, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any comments or questions about it, please put it in the comments section below. If you like the content and you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell notification so you get notified when I post next week's video. And until then, stay safe in small groups, everyone.